So when it comes to scams, what comes to mind, right? Of course, we have the romance scams. Oh, I know they've all been over. The Nigerian prince scams. That's so old school. Now we have pig butchering scams and AI deep fakes and voice cloning scams. I mean, the list goes on and on. So knowing all of that, if I ask you a question, what scam has increased over 400% over the last year? What do you think that answer is? Are you ready for it? I know. Pig, I'm sorry. Are you ready for it? We're talking about check fraud. Yes, check fraud has increased 400% over the last year. I know, it's such an old school type of crime. Well, joining us here on Kim Commando today is my good friend, Frank Abagnale. Now, you know Frank. He's the real-life inspiration behind Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can movie. I mean, it's just an amazing movie. Leonardo DiCaprio played Frank, but I will tell you, Frank is a lot better looking. Hey, Frank, so glad to see you back with us.
Always good to be with you. Thank you.
So, Frank, thanks for joining. So, with check fraud making such a big comeback, wow, how do you think scammers are using, say, some of the old ways for check fraud that they're doing today?
Well, listen, first of all, I'm amazed because what I did 50 years ago is 4,000 times easier to do today. I mean, think about 50 years ago when I had to take some blank checks and paste and cut and type over with typewriters and cut decals out of model planes and put them on. Today, you can create just about anything with AI. I can create an image and open a bank account. I can create identification to go along with that and put it online to open an account. And of course, the old tools of check washing and check forgery are all coming back. A lot of this is because not all criminals are very smart when it comes to computers, so they fall back on the easy crimes. And check forgery has become very, very, very simple. And let me give you a simple example. Let's say that you write a check to ExxonMobil, you put it in your remittance envelope, you put it in your mailbox, you put the flag up. I come along, I take it out, I take the check out, and all I do is write on the back for deposit only to my account. As long as I make that deposit by a mobile phone or through an ATM, no human being will ever see it. So the check will clear because you have the money in the account. The following month, you'll get a statement from Exxon saying you owe last month, and you'll call them up, say, no, that's not right. I do online banking. The check is right here. It cleared my account. And they'll ask you what the account number is on the back, and it's not their account. That's how simple it is to do because we have made it so simple through automation.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting because you would think that we would have so many, no puns intended, checks and balances that check fraud would be really difficult to do.
It's very simple to do, and washing checks is very simple, creating checks, altering checks, and they're not doing a good job at banks when they open accounts. They really don't know their customer like they should know their customer. And what happens is the small banks and the credit unions who get hurt because those are the ones who end up taking that check or taking it for deposit, and their only recourse is to go back and try to sue the big bank. And if it's not a huge amount for the check, like 40,000, 100,000, the bank just kind of blows it off. So the small bank gets stuck with it. You can't believe how many, I dealt with this 20 years ago. I wrote a book in 2001 called The Art of the Steal. It was all about check forgery and counterfeiting and altering checks. And I can't believe that here I am 25 years later, still talking about it all over again, and it's back as an enormous crime. And I'm getting all these emails from people who say, come back and give seminars about check forgery. Well, that's what I did 20 years ago. I moved on to cybercrime and the internet and all the things that have come since then. But here this old crime has made a comeback because we've made it so easy to do.
So, so that's hard to believe. But think about it, this could be like a whole new gig for you, Frank. I mean, you don't have to recreate anything. You just pull the stuff out of the archives and you're like, okay, check fraud, here we are.
Or just simply go to my computer, bring up a very sophisticated check with a very sophisticated background blank, go to a corporate company's website, capture that logo, put it up in the left-hand corner, capture a bank's logo, put it down the bottom left, code in all the information, and in 15 minutes I have a beautiful 4-color gorgeous check that I can go deposit or cash somewhere. So the technology has made it very simple. The old days of printing and having a printing press and all of those things are long gone. So the crimes become very easy. So more and more people are committing that crime. The other thing is there's very little prosecution. I mean, I did this as a teenager and got 12 years in federal prison. If I was doing that today, I'd be amazed if I got a year or 6 months or probably probation for doing the same thing. So the punishment isn't there. The crime has become a lot easier. So people are exploiting it and taking advantage of that.
So, Frank, do you write checks?
Very few checks.
Okay. So,
Um, you
so
pay my
private.
mortgage, pay an insurance company, but I use highly sophisticated checks. I designed a check 25 years ago for a California check company called Safe Checks. I don't have any interest in the company. I don't get royalties. They paid me to design the check. And today, 25 years later, millions of those checks, both personal and business, are used by insurance companies and corporations. They have never had a forgery. They've never had a counterfeit. They've never had a wash check. They never had anybody alter the check. So you can make a check very secure, but instead most companies just use basket weave check paper they buy at the office supply store. They don't spend a lot of money securing their checks. So they make it very easy for criminals to alter them, wash them, or change them.
Wait, I hope you're getting royalties on all those checks. Okay.
No, I don't get any royalties. You know, I
Oh,
designed ADP's check, I designed Paycheck's check 25 years ago. But you can make a check very secure, but most companies don't. So I always look at something as a deterrent. If I get two checks out of the mailbox, one is very sophisticated with all of these security features, and the other one is simply a green basket weave check paper that's been laser printed. I'm going to do the easy check. I'm not looking for a challenge. I'm looking for an opportunity. So all I ever did is make it so hard for them to alter it, wash it, or counterfeit it that they didn't do it.
so what makes those checks so different?
All of the security features in them so that if you wash the check, it destroys the check. You can't lift the toner off. There are ways to tech recognize from the bank that the check is counterfeited and forged. There are all these different security features that you can put in the document. And the difference is this: 25 years ago, that cost a little more money. So an insurance company said, you know, I don't want to spend 10% more on checks because they're highly secure. Today, they mass produce those checks under high security operations and stored in high security places, and they imprint the company's logos and information on them. So they're about the same price as if you bought a cheap check, but it's just using the right tool to do the right job. That's all it really comes down to. You know, if you make it easy for someone, if you make it easy for someone to steal from you, it's very unfortunate, but probably somebody will. So I always try to make it not easy.
You know, as what's interesting is how, I guess you'd say, flippant some companies are about checks. Like, for example, I had ordered some checks from my financial institution on a line of credit, and they delivered the checks via USPS, putting them in my mailbox. And I called mom and said, I can't believe that with no signature required, nothing needed, that you just mailed a checkbook to me and like stuffed it in my mailbox. We're talking about like a major banking financial institution. And the response was like, oh, well, we didn't think there would be anything wrong with that. I'm like, not really? It's like crazy.
Listen, I have made withdrawals from my IRA, and they've come in a cashier's check, but in a plain envelope with the bank's name printed in the corner and handwritten in the middle and just posted in the stamp. There's nothing else in the envelope, just the check. So, you know, they make it so easy for people to do these things, and that's why people are doing it. The same thing goes with education. You know, 25 years ago, all the seminars I did were for banks and their corporate customers. They would put them on to help educate their customers, to help their customers understand they needed to do these things. Today, banks don't do that anymore. They don't put on programs. They don't try to educate their customers. And so these people really don't know what they're supposed to do to make their checks secure and to keep people from getting them.
Well, so I guess what's the solution? Do everything online as much as you can. Try not to write a check. Use the secure checks that you designed that are still
You
in
use
use.
secure checks. The company I designed them for is called Safe Check. You can look at their personal checks and their business checks. They've never been forged or counterfeited. But you also can, I remind people, if I'm mailing a check and I'm sending, I go to the post office and drop it at the post office. Regular mail, yes, I'll drop it in the mailbox. But if I'm sending out checks to someone, I actually go by the post office and drop it in the post office because they break into mailboxes all the time. They send phishing lines down the mailbox. Now, the post office has started to secure the mailbox and make it more difficult to do that. But it's still more common sense for me to take, if I'm writing a check, especially a large check, to take it to the post office and mail it myself.
Well, I'll tell you, when the last letter that I got from you, it's still sitting on my desk, because it looked so secure. And as far as with the paper and you couldn't see through the envelope, and it's like, okay, if this is how I'm going to mail a letter, I'm going to do it like Frank Abagnale does. This is it.
You got to think, you got to be a little smarter today than you did 20 years ago. And you help people do that every single day. And that's what's important. We really don't educate people a lot. We don't have a lot of public service ads anymore to help educate people. There's not a lot of good educational material out there. That's why it's so important to have shows like yours where people can get information, ask questions, because people just don't know and they're not getting that information from their financial institution.
Yeah, and it's shocking to me. It's like they just throw everybody out there, and then they wonder why they get ripped off, or they click
Exactly.
on bad links, or they get scammed. I mean, and it's so sad because just yesterday, Frank, I took a call from a guy who lost $200,000 in a pig butchering scam. Okay, yesterday I spoke to a young man whose mother firmly believes that she is going to marry a 26-year-old Nigerian and she's 70 years old. Okay. And is just giving away her money. I'm dumbfounded at how gullible some people are. It's just strange to me.
I'm like you, and I'm mostly amazed about extremely educated people, doctors, lawyers, accountants, that get scammed all the time by these scams. And you're thinking, if they're getting scammed, what would someone get scammed if they didn't have a lot of knowledge about this, if those people are getting scammed? And again, a lot of lack of education. I get so many emails. I can't answer all the emails I get. I try to answer and help people as much as I can, but I cannot believe how much money they lose. 200,000, 250,000, half a million. It's not somebody scammed out of $8,000 or $5,000. It's huge amounts, and they're ridiculous scams that you'd say, why would you fall for that?
And there's one I talked to today, $600,000. $600,000, and because somebody reached out to her on a DM on Facebook and thought and said, I can turn your retirement money into this. And then there's another scam that I spoke to a guy who he thought that the FBI had contacted him and needed his help. I'm like, really? Okay.
I have found that the most important word going on into the future, especially when it comes to AI, is the word verification. You have to verify who's on the other end of that device. Anything today can be counterfeited, replicated, deep-faked, AI. So before you part with any money, before you part with any information, you absolutely need to know who's on the other end of that device. And that's the most common sense I can tell someone. You have to check it out and make sure that that person is who they say they are, and you know who you're doing business with.
Yeah, in the case of the woman who thinks she's in love with a 26-year-old guy in Nigeria, he keeps promising that he's going to come out and see her. But then, of course, his visa gets held up and he can't make the flight. He had the flight. He missed the flight. He needs some money for an additional flight. And they just keep paying. It's just
They
nuts.
keep paying. And the scary thing is when you look at a lot of these AI scams, the actual person is not a person. They don't exist. They were created by AIs. It must be a beautiful woman. It can be this great looking man. So who are you going to go after? The person doesn't exist. They say they're in Hong Kong when it's really somebody in Nigeria who made up this image. So there's nobody to go arrest or do anything. The actual person doesn't exist. It's just an image, an AI creation. They think they're dealing with that person. You know, what's interesting to me today is that we're at about 97% of actually replicating someone perfectly on AI. So in the next couple of years, when we get to 100% of replicating an individual on AI, where it would be almost impossible to determine that it's AI, are we going to have lawyers who say, that's not my client coming out of the bank, that's AI. That's not me with my girlfriend and my wife claims I'm dating this person and I'm married. That's not me, that's AI. That's going to become a big defense.
Yeah, and and that's a good point, Frank. Verification is going to be key, and but you still have a certain element of society that maybe they just don't want to verify. I am thinking of a guy that I'm trying to help right now, one-on-one, not on the air, one-on-one, because he really thinks that as a 65-year-old retired guy in the Midwest, that Reese Witherspoon, the model, actress, billionaire,
Right.
really wants to marry him. And he sent me the videos that Reese has sent him. And I'll tell you, Frank, you look at these videos and it's like, hi, I'm Reese and I love you and send me my check. And you're sitting there, I'm like going, just want to slap the crap out of the guy.
I know, it's truly, it's sad, but at the same time, it's just amazing to me. I cannot believe that people fall for these scams and why they can't ask someone. If they are in doubt, then go ask someone you trust, whether it be a lawyer, your banker, somebody, and say, do you think this is real? Do you think this is a scam? That's what people do. They send me emails and I tell them this is a scam. Don't do this. And at least they took the step to ask if this was a scam. But you have to do that.
No, you do. And so this guy, Frank, he sent it to me because he wanted to know if it was a scam. Okay. So we told him this is a scam, and then he hung up the phone. He doesn't want to believe that Reese Witherspoon is all hot the trot to just walk down the aisle with him and they're going to live happily ever after. It's not so.
It happens all the time. There are people who claim they want a Mercedes-Benz, but had to pay this money, taxes, shipping charges. By the time they're done, they paid more than the Mercedes-Benz cost, and they still don't think they're being scammed. So, I mean, you can only do so much. You can try to help educate people. If they're going to make fools of themselves and do things like that, there's not much you can do about it.
Well, Frank, thanks for spending some time with us. I appreciate it. I do. You're awesome.
I always enjoy spending time with you.
Hey, listen, you got to come to Phoenix someday.
Absolutely.
You're always welcome.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
Thanks, Frank.